Watch how Rachel Reeves' budget has turned into a nightmare for millions across Britain. From small business owners to everyday families, the impact has been anything but balanced. In Parliament, Reeves faced a grilling over her economic plans, but when the pressure mounted, she had few answers and plenty of deflection. Questions on tax hikes, small business closures and rising living costs were met with vague responses or dodged entirely. Let's take a look at the clip. Before we continue, I have one small request. If you're enjoying this deep dive into British politics, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Britain Briefed. Believe it or not, over 98% of you watch these videos without subscribing. It's completely free and it helps us keep bringing you the hard-hitting stories that matter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. At the general election, the Chancellor promised growth and no increase in taxes. But as Chancellor, she has delivered no growth and a record increase in taxes. And now the Office for Budget Responsibility is halving her growth forecast this year, cumulatively 0.5% less over the forecast period. And more worryingly, they are also forecasting a 1% reduction over 1% reduction in productivity growth. Why does she think that is?
Chancellor. I've got a huge respect for the Honourable Lady, but that question doesn't do her justice. As I said to the Right Honourable Gentleman earlier, yes, if you start in 2023, cumulative growth is lower, but the general election didn't take place in 2023. It took place in 2024. The economy is bigger at the end of this Parliament than the OBR forecast previously. Those are the numbers, those are the facts. That's the difference that this Labour government are making.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Chancellor tells us the world has changed, and if that's true to allow her to stick the boot into disabled people, it must also be true then to allow her to review her income tax rates, perhaps commensurate with those existing in Scotland, which has saw the Scottish economy grow in January by 0.3%, while the UK contracted by 0.1%. She could also choose to revise the government's position on reaccessing the single market in the European Union, which would allow a 30 billion recurring return with no compensation required, or a 1% tax on assets over 10 million. A wealth tax, as one of our backbenchers has just highlighted, 40 billion recurring every year with no need for compensation. If she's got the disabled, the WASPy women, pensioners and hospices in her crosshairs, why can she not tap up multi-millionaires for a few quid?
The world has changed, and we can see that all around us, which is why our defence is more important than other. That's why it's so astonishing that the SNP continue to oppose the nuclear deterrent.
Steve Darling.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today and last week, the Chancellor rushed through severe cuts to the benefit system that will hit some of the most vulnerable in our society. Whilst we should have considered benefit reform, this is ill-conceived. Can the Chancellor explain to the Chamber why she is choosing to balance the books of the nation on on the backs of some of the most vulnerable of those in our society?
Chancellor.
I have huge respect for the Honourable Gentleman, but I think everybody in this House and everyone in the country can see that the welfare system is just not working. When you've got 1 in 8 young people not in education, employment or training, 1,000 people going on to personal independence payments every single day, we can't carry on like this. The basic principles of this government is that people who need support should be protected. Those who can work should work, and we will support them with personalised, targeted support, and that we need a system that is sustainable. That is what the reforms set out by my right honourable friend, the Work and Pension Secretary, deliver last week alongside the Green Paper, where there will be further consultation to make sure that those with the most severe need get the additional support that they are rightly entitled to.
The Chancellor has created a storm and now is complaining about the rain. She increased spending to 70 billion, she increased borrowing by 30 billion, she increased tax by 40 billion, and yet the economy shrank in January. Now, she did talk about change and the abolition NHS England. Now, I put a written question in to the department to say how much would this cost. They said there would be some upfront costs, but couldn't specify. So with this top-down change, could she tell me what the estimated cost is of abolishing NHS England?
Chancellor.
It's really difficult to understand what the party opposite want. Do they want to reduce the cost of admin and bureaucracy, or do they want to carry on with everything the way it was? We want to change things, and that's why in the transformation fund that I set out today includes £150 million for a voluntary exit scheme, because we want more money on the front line, not in the back office and a bloated bureaucracy left by the party opposites.
Alberto Costa.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Chancellor rightly reminded this House in her statement that the British public are watching. And among the British public watching are tens of thousands of the most vulnerable pensioners in our society. Can she please explain to the House what is Labour about removing the winter fuel payment from those having £13,500 a year?
Next month, because of the triple lock which we've been able to protect, the basic state pension, the new state pension, will increase by more than £400. And during the course of this Parliament, because of the triple lock which the Shadow Chancellor opposes, the triple lock will cost an additional £31 billion. So that's the protection that we're giving to pensioners, as well as record investment into our NHS, which of course older people use with greater frequency than anyone else.
Adrian Ramsey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Chancellor knows that our economy has been driven to the edge over the last 15 years, with ordinary people forced to bear the burden, while a small minority have amassed extreme wealth. This is something she could change, and her own backbenchers are lining up to argue for a wealth tax. So why won't she do the fair and right thing and introduce a tax on the very wealthiest, rather than launching austerity 2.0 and removing vital support from disabled and ill people?
The best thing that we can do for our constituents is build the homes that they desperately need. And so I really have no understanding of why the Green Party voted against the planning and infrastructure bill this week. What have they got against to get families getting homes and young people getting jobs?
Wendy Morton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today, the Chancellor could have taken action to reverse the damage that she has done to constituents and businesses in my constituency and beyond, but she's failed. She's chosen not to do so. So what does she say to the pensioners, the farmers, the businesses, the charities, the hospices, and all those hard-working people who now face her huge tax rises?
Chancellor.
When I became Chancellor, I inherited £22 billion, a black hole in the public finances left by the party opposite. And we've taken action to address the hole in our public finances. And what I would say to the Honourable Lady's constituents, and indeed, Right Honourable Lady's constituents, is that when they are waiting for an NHS appointment, they're now going to see a doctor and a nurse quicker than they did under the last government, because NHS waiting lists have fallen for 5 months in a row.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Right Honourable Lady talks of financial responsibility. So could she tell us, please, when government bond yields hit their highest level since the global financial crisis, and who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer then? And if she needs a clue, we can bring her a mirror.
Thank the Honourable Lady for that question. You can see, if you look at financial markets and follow them closely, that the increase in bond yields in the UK, in France and Germany have closely tracked each other. Global financial instability has affected countries around the world, and that's why it's so important that we continue to meet our fiscal rules as I have set out today.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given that the Chancellor chose not to mention Chagos in her statement, and given that she chose not to answer the Shadow Chancellor's question on Chagos, can the House now assume that this disastrous deal will not be going ahead, and more importantly, that the UK taxpayer will not be footing the bill?
Well, as the Honourable Gentleman know, our Prime Minister and President Trump discussed these issues when our Prime Minister was at the White House recently. We continue to work on those plans. The most important thing is that we protect our national security and can continue to operate out of that important base.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There are 4.3 million children living in poverty in our society. There are 1.2 million people in receipt of PIP who are about to lose it following her statement last week. She's put a huge amount of money into defence. Could she not think for a moment of reversing the decision last week to take £5 billion out of the welfare budget and end the two-child benefit cap, which has driven so many children and families into really desperate poverty?
I'm not going to make any apologies for putting more money in defence. This Labour government takes defence of our country seriously, and so we should. We are the party that created NATO, and under the leadership of the Labour Party today, we will always defend our country.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Chancellor's trouble is, while her manifesto promised to limit spending increases to £9.5 billion a year, her budget's increased spending by £76 billion a year, 8 times as much. She's previously said she will not come back asking for more tax rises or more borrowing. So will she rule out both in the budget later this year?
The budget in the autumn last year wiped the slate clean after the 14 years of economic mismanagement by the party opposite. We won't have to repeat a budget like that because we're not going to inherit anything like that ever again, because we've changed the rules so that the OBR always now get information rather than it being hidden like it was by the previous government.
So, what do you think? Is Labour already losing control, or is this just a bump in the road for Reeves and Starmer? Could this budget mark the beginning of a bigger political unravelling? We want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments, whether you agree, disagree, or have a completely different take. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to Britain Briefed. We're here to cut through the noise and bring you sharp, honest coverage of the stories that matter. Your support keeps us going.